Too late. That was the sentence Daniel had been whispering to himself for the last 12 years. Too late to change careers. Too late to fix his marriage. Too late to become the man he once promised he would be. At 20, he believed the world was wide open. At 30, he believed he still had time. At 40, he began calculating the years he had wasted. At 52, he stopped calculating at all, because numbers don't hurt as much as truth. Daniel used to wake up with ideas, big ones, dangerous ones, the kind that make your heart race before your feet even touch the ground. He wanted to build something, write something, lead something, create something that would outlive him. But life is quiet when it closes in on you. It doesn't scream. It doesn't announce itself. It slowly replaces your dreams with responsibilities. First came the stable job, just for now, he told himself. Then came the promotion, then the mortgage. Then the second car, then the second child, then the exhaustion. He told himself he was being practical. Practical is a very polite word for afraid. At 35, he considered quitting and starting the small design studio he used to dream about. He even made a logo one night, registered a domain name, sketched ideas in a notebook. Then his son got sick that winter. Hospital bills don't care about your dreams. So he closed the laptop and told himself, later? Later is the most expensive word in the English language. At 42, he felt the itch again. His job was safe but empty. He was respected but invisible. He was earning but not living. One night he stayed up alone in the kitchen. The house was silent. He opened his old notebook from years ago. The paper smelled like dust and time. The ideas were still there. Raw, ambitious, alive. He stared at them for almost an hour. Then he closed the notebook again. Too late, he thought. I'm not young anymore. The industry has changed. There's too much competition. I don't have the energy. The truth was simpler. He didn't have the courage. Courage doesn't disappear overnight. It erodes. Slowly, with every compromise you justify. By 48, Daniel had perfected the art of looking content. At work, he gave advice to younger colleagues about chasing opportunities. At home, he told his children they could be anything they wanted. He never noticed the irony. One afternoon, a new hire joined his department. 26 years old, confident, reckless. The kind of energy Daniel used to carry. Her name was Maya. She asked him during lunch, "If you could start over, what would you do?" The question hit him harder than he expected. Start over. He forced a small laugh. "I'd probably make smarter investments." She smiled. "No, I mean, what would you build?" Build. The word echoed in his chest long after she walked away. That evening, he drove home in silence. No radio, no podcasts. Just the hum of the engine and the weight of a question he hadn't allowed himself to hear in years. What would you build? At a red light, he looked at his reflection in the rearview mirror. There were lines near his eyes now. His hair was thinning. His face carried fatigue like a permanent shadow. When did I get here? He thought. The light turned green. He didn't move for a second too long. A car behind him honked. That sound snapped something inside him. Not anger. Not fear. Awareness. Time does not slow down because you are unsure. At home, his wife was scrolling through her phone on the couch. The television was on, but nobody was watching. His children were in their rooms. The house felt full and empty at the same time. He went to his study and opened a drawer he hadn't touched in years. The notebook was still there. He flipped through the pages again. And for the first time, instead of seeing what he had missed, he saw something else. He saw that the ideas were not dead. They were waiting. There is a dangerous myth people believe after a certain age. They believe opportunity has an expiration date. They believe ambition belongs to the young. They believe reinvention is reserved for people without history. Daniel believed all of that until he asked himself one brutal question. If I live another 20 years exactly like this, will I be proud? The answer came immediately, no. And that terrified him more than failure ever had. Failure hurts once. Regret hurts daily. That night he didn't close the notebook. He didn't quit his job. He didn't make a dramatic announcement. He did something much smaller. He wrote one paragraph. Just one. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't groundbreaking. It was messy and uncertain. But it was movement. The next morning, nothing looked different. The same commute, the same office, the same meetings. But something inside him had shifted. He wasn't waiting anymore. He was beginning. And beginnings don't need permission. They need decision. For weeks, he woke up 30 minutes earlier than usual. Before emails, before noise, before excuses. He worked on his idea quietly. Some days it felt pointless. Some days he stared at the screen and doubted everything. "You're too old for this," a voice would whisper. "Who do you think you are? Why now?" He answered that voice with a simple action. Another paragraph, another sketch, another small step. Momentum does not arrive fully formed. It is built. 3 months passed. Nobody knew. On the outside, Daniel was the same dependable manager he had always been. On the inside, he was rebuilding himself. One evening, Maya stayed late at the office. She noticed lights still on in Daniel's office and knocked gently. "I didn't know you stayed this late," she said. "I don't," he replied. He hesitated for a moment, then turned his laptop slightly so she could see the screen. It wasn't a presentation. It wasn't company work. It was his project. She read a few lines silently. "This is yours," she asked. He nodded. She looked at him differently after that, not as a manager, as a creator. Something about that look reignited a part of him he thought was gone. Respect feels different when it's for who you are, not just what you do. Months turned into a year. His project grew. Not viral. Not famous, just real. He made mistakes, he revised constantly. He learned new tools. He felt foolish sometimes asking younger people for technical help. Humility replaced ego. Growth replaced comfort. And slowly, the sentence, "too late," began losing its power. Because every day he acted, it became less true. One afternoon during his 53rd birthday, his family gathered around the table. His daughter asked him, "Dad, if you could give me one piece of advice about life, what would it be?" He didn't answer quickly. He thought about all the years he had almost surrendered to fear. Then he said, "Don't wait until you're brave. Start while you're scared." The words surprised even him, because they were new. They were honest. That night, after everyone went to bed, he stood alone in the kitchen. He realized something profound. Age had not stolen his opportunity. Inaction had, and the moment he chose action, age became irrelevant. There will come a day when it truly is too late, when health fails, when time runs out, when choices disappear. But most people use that sentence decades before it becomes real. They surrender early. They retire from their own potential while they are still breathing. Daniel wasn't special. He wasn't a prodigy. He wasn't fearless. He was simply tired of living with the question of what if, and that tiredness became fuel. If you had met him at 49, you would have thought he was finished. If you met him at 55, you would see a man just getting started. The difference was not time. It was decision. Too late is rarely about the clock. It is about belief, and belief can change in a single moment. Right now, somewhere in your life, there is a notebook you closed, an idea you postponed, a call you didn't make, a version of yourself you quietly abandoned. The question is not whether it is too late. The question is whether you are willing. Willing to look foolish. Willing to be a beginner again. Willing to trade comfort for growth. Daniel once believed courage belonged to his younger self. He learned that courage is not a trait of youth. It is a choice repeated daily. And the day he stopped asking if it was too late was the day his life actually began. Daniel woke up the next morning before dawn. The house was quiet. The city outside was still sleeping. Most people would still be wrapped in blankets, oblivious to the day waiting for them. But he was awake, not because he had to be, not because someone told him to. He was awake because something inside him had shifted. Something permanent, something he had long forgotten existed urgency. He brewed coffee and carried it to his small study. The notebook lay open on the desk. The page he had written the night before seemed to pulse under the dim light. Words that once felt shaky and uncertain now carried weight. They weren't perfect, but they were alive. He began to write again. For hours, ideas poured out like a dam breaking. Every paragraph revealed pieces of himself he had abandoned: his creativity, his curiosity, his audacity. It was as if each word was reclaiming lost years. At mid-morning, he received an email from a colleague about a routine project. Normally, he would have responded immediately, buried in the habits of his old life. Today, he hesitated. He realized he could still do his responsibilities without letting them consume him. He left the email for later. His priority was no longer convenience. His priority was life itself. By noon, he noticed a strange thing happening, a confidence he hadn't felt in decades. It wasn't loud or arrogant. It was quiet, solid. It was the kind of confidence that didn't demand attention but commanded respect. It grew with every word he wrote, every idea he refined. He took a walk that afternoon, something he rarely did. The air was crisp, the city alive in small, unnoticed ways. The laughter of children in a park, the scent of coffee drifting from a cafe, the hum of traffic weaving stories of thousands of lives intersecting. For years, he had rushed through life like a passenger on a train, oblivious to the stations. Today he noticed. He absorbed, he felt. At the corner of a busy street, he paused. A young man struggled with a heavy backpack, clearly exhausted. Daniel stepped forward instinctively and helped him lift it onto his shoulders. The young man thanked him, smiled, and walked away. Daniel felt something he hadn't in years, meaning in a small act. He realized that life wasn't only about grand achievements. Sometimes, it was the small interventions, the tiny sparks that created waves. That evening, he returned home, exhausted but exhilarated. His family was waiting. His wife noticed a different energy in him, a quiet intensity. His children asked about his day, and for the first time in years, he could give them an answer that wasn't just work or school. He spoke about ideas, creation, movement. The room felt lighter, warmer, alive with possibility. The next weeks were a rhythm. Daniel wrote every morning, studied new skills in the afternoon, and reflected each night. It was a life lived deliberately, consciously. He started researching, sketching plans, connecting with people who could help him grow his project. Each small interaction was a step toward reclaiming years lost. One evening, he met with a retired friend, someone who had also spent decades in safety and predictability. Over dinner, the friend asked, "Daniel, why now? Why not earlier?" Daniel thought for a moment and smiled. "Because I wasn't ready," he said honestly. "I had to understand what I was willing to lose. And I had to be done lying to myself." "And are you ready now?" Daniel's eyes gleamed. "More than I've ever been." Months passed. The project grew, piece by piece. Daniel experienced setbacks, moments when doubt threatened to consume him. There were nights he wanted to quit, to tell himself that he was too old, too slow, too out of practice. But the memory of those wasted years, the ache of regret, became fuel. Failure no longer scared him, regret did. And he would never go back to being its prisoner. He began sharing his journey quietly, mentoring others, offering guidance to anyone seeking courage to begin. He realized that motivation wasn't about a single act. It was about living proof that it was possible, even in the most ordinary of lives. Ordinary people, ordinary days, extraordinary change. A year into this new chapter, Daniel finally allowed himself to dream bigger. He imagined speaking at events, writing books, influencing minds. And he knew something crucial: dreaming wasn't about success, wealth, or fame. Dreaming was about reclaiming the self you almost lost. It was about giving yourself the life you once thought was out of reach. Daniel looked into the mirror one morning, tracing the lines on his face. The years were still there, but now they told a story not of regret, but of resurrection. Each line marked a decision, a moment when he refused to surrender. The gray in his hair reminded him not of age, but of wisdom earned through struggle and courage. He remembered Maya, the young colleague who had unknowingly challenged him. He realized that sometimes the spark comes from unexpected places, and sometimes the fire had to be found. Daniel had been working on his project for almost 2 years now. Every morning, he woke up with purpose. Every evening, he went to bed with exhaustion that felt earned. He had grown confident, experienced small victories, and found a rhythm that had eluded him for decades. But life, as it always does, has a way of testing the resolve of those who dare to begin late. It started with a client meeting he had been preparing for weeks, a chance to pitch his idea to a company that could finally bring it to life on a larger scale. Daniel had rehearsed every line, refined every diagram, and anticipated every question. He had studied their history, their business model, their weaknesses. He was ready. When the meeting began, everything seemed fine at first. The clients listened politely, nodding at intervals. But as the discussion went deeper, it became clear that Daniel's vision did not align with their expectations. His ideas were too unconventional, too ambitious, too different. The silence that followed his final slide was deafening. The client leaned back in his chair, folded his hands, and said simply, "Thank you, Daniel. We'll be in touch." That "we'll be in touch" hit harder than any rejection Daniel had experienced in his entire life. He had braced himself for failure, yes, but the finality of it, the polite dismissal, was almost unbearable. He left the building with his shoulders slumped. The city streets, once alive and vibrant to him, now felt gray and oppressive. Each step felt heavier than the last. At home, he tried to maintain composure. He greeted his wife with a smile, played with his children, and even cooked dinner. But every glance at the notebook on his desk reminded him of the effort, the time, the energy he had poured into a dream that seemed to have collapsed before it even began. That night, he sat in the study alone. The room was dim, the city lights casting long shadows across the walls. He opened his notebook. The words he had written, the paragraphs, sketches, plans, all felt meaningless now. He closed it abruptly. Too late, he whispered to himself. For the first time in months, the fear returned. The old, familiar fear he had spent years trying to escape. The fear of inadequacy. The fear of failure. The fear of wasted years. He went to bed early, but sleep did not come. His mind raced with what-ifs and should-haves. Should he have pitched a smaller project? Should he have waited for the perfect moment? Should he have given up? The next morning, he considered calling it quits. Just like that. Throw in the towel. Return to his old life, to safety, to stability, to the quiet despair of what could have been. But something inside him resisted, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly. A small voice that said, "This isn't the end, not for you." Daniel got up, dressed, and walked to his favorite park. He sat on a bench watching the early morning sun spill gold over the trees. Children played. Joggers ran. Dogs barked. Life moved forward, indifferent and relentless. And Daniel realized something: failure does not discriminate. It doesn't care about your age, your effort, your dreams, or your past. Everyone falls. Everyone hits walls. The difference is not in the fall. The difference is in what you do after. He pulled out his notebook again and started writing, not plans, not pitches, not polished ideas, just raw thoughts, confessions, fears, anger, hope, pain. Every emotion he had tried to bury. Writing became catharsis, it became clarity. By the time he put the pen down, he had made a decision. He would not quit. Not because the world owed him success, but because he owed it to himself. Daniel knew that rejection was not a reflection of his worth. It was a reflection of timing, perspective, and circumstance. Some doors were closing, yes, but he could still find other doors or create new ones entirely. Weeks passed. The sting of the failure lingered, but it no longer consumed him. Daniel began networking again, reaching out to people he had admired from afar, learning from mentors, connecting with those who had faced similar setbacks. Each conversation added fuel. Each setback taught lessons. During this period, he also started helping others who were struggling. He volunteered at local workshops, mentored young professionals, and shared his story openly, his failures as much as his small victories. He realized that in helping others, he reinforced his own courage. Then came a turning point. One evening, while revising his project late at night, he stumbled on an idea that was bold, unconventional, and unlike anything he had tried before. It was a risk, a big one. One that could either fail spectacularly or succeed beyond imagination. Daniel hesitated. For a moment, he felt the old fear creeping in. What if it fails? What if it's too late? Then he remembered the months, the years, the decades of waiting. Too late is only real when you stop trying, he reminded himself. So he moved forward. He sent proposals. He pitched again. He reached out to contacts he had never approached. And slowly, the momentum began to build. One small win, then another. Not massive success, but tangible progress. Not recognition, but validation. More importantly, Daniel had rediscovered joy in the struggle. Every challenge, every obstacle, every rejection became a step, not a wall. And he realized the most important lesson of all: it is never too late to start again. Not at 50, not at 60, not at 70. Every day is a chance to rewrite the story you thought was finished. By the end of the year, Daniel's project had grown beyond what he could have imagined. It wasn't a global phenomenon, but it had an audience, a community, a heartbeat. And Daniel, for the first time in decades, felt alive in the way he had always longed for. He sat at his desk one evening, looking at the notebook that had been both his confessional and his blueprint. He traced the words he had written over the years, smiling at the journey. He realized that failure was not the enemy. Fear was not the enemy. The true enemy had always been inaction, the paralysis of doubt, The lie of too late. Daniel had learned the truth. It's not about age, timing, or perfection. It's about courage, one decision, one action, one step forward, no matter how small. And with that realization, he knew that the next chapter of his life would be the most daring yet. Because once you confront your fears, embrace your failures, and act despite them, life begins, truly begins.